All the guests were couples. I was the lone single. I told myself not to think of it as deeply symbolic. I told myself it might have been a coincidence, or maybe an act of compassion on the part of the couples. I told myself it would be over soon, like life itself. It would not go on forever. Even when I'd been doubled, I'd felt single. I didn't understand why. When I'd said to my partner, Kathy, that I felt single, she said, "Well, fuck off then." Which kind of confirmed my feelings. People say it's good to have a partner who confirms your feelings, but in that case it wasn't so good. The host of the dinner party had not told me that it would be a couples party, so maybe he didn't see it that way. Maybe he had an enlightened view and saw it simply as a people party. And by virtue of me being a person, I was includable. It's good to be includable, but you never know how long it's going to last. And still I felt like the sole exception to something, which detracted from any momentary joy associated with feelings of inclusion. I hate when I have a moment of joy and then a thought comes along to detract from it, but it always happens. I wondered if the coupled people who sat around the table from me also felt, on occasion at any rate, like sole exceptions of a sort, and made up for the ensuing discomfort by snuggling up with another sole exception in a shared bed at the end of day. I felt like this was a fair enough theory, but I didn't feel comfortable testing out my theory with a question because it simply wasn't the sort of question it felt wise to pose as the one single person in a sea of couples. What I have noticed is the good questions often have to be shelved or saved for another time, a time that never comes. Unless, of course, there was to come a time when I myself might share a bed with another person. But by then it might be too late, at least too late to pose an honest question or get an honest answer, one that would lend some integrity to the research. If you want to maintain your integrity, a shared bed can pose unforeseen challenges. 2 large bowls of noodles slathered in meat sauce were passed around. This was a cultured crowd, and the food, which came without a salad, or really without vegetables of any kind, seemed orgiastic and out of place. That consoled me, since an out-of-place feeling was one I felt a special kinship with. A very drunk woman sat across from me, which I have never really objected to. As a rule, I rather like it at first, then later not as much. She placed a tremendous pile of noodles on her plate. I loved the lusty way she did it. "This is food. I'm having some," was the kind of style in which she went about accomplishing it. I was starting to admire this drunken woman who told me her name was Sandra. I had not asked her her name. Between mouthfuls, she just came right out and gave it to me. Fair enough, I thought, and most sociable. I think she knew things, like how the real questions seldom get asked, and she could probably tell that I was an appreciator of her appreciations. Her relationship to the noodles being one obvious example. I felt sure she sensed my growing admiration. In this way, she was her own type of sole exception, exceptionally attuned to a particular type of admirer. She let me know that she was an artist who specialized in installations, and said she could place me in one of her installations because her intuition led her to believe I'd be very installable. I was ready to have her stick me any old place she wanted. She had formidable teeth, not something that worried me, and also a stain on her white blouse that did worry me. I wanted the power not to fall under the spell of that stain, which had become, in terms of impression, as significant as the person wearing it, if that's the proper way to speak of a stain, as something worn. I made efforts to look away, but was continuously drawn back. I wanted to alert her to it, but because of its location, that felt too daring. Because as everyone, particularly her partner, would surely know, her breasts were inside that blouse. It was really the only place her breasts could be. I wished that the stain had been on her sleeve, because a stain on her sleeve would have led me to point out its exact and fortuitously innocuous location. That would have been perfectly appropriate and even useful. And I had this theory that women appreciated men who were useful. But a stain shows up where it wants to, and that's life, as Frank Sinatra once sang. And a great many other people have come to much the same conclusion.